Business Focus with Kudzie Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.
Good morning and welcome to Business Focus right here on Kapi Talk, where we discuss what's happening in the world of business. So we also get to know some of the things that you always debate about. Kudzie Sharara is right here to help us through that. Good morning to you, Kudzie. How are you today?
Good morning, Tinashe. Good morning, everyone.
Great. Let's begin with the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, the trading update for yesterday.
Thank you, Tinashe. So we continue to see the market trading a little bit mixed. Yesterday was slightly positive, up by 0.85%. That's on the all share index, and 0.94% on the top 10 index. And then the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange down by 1.83%. Just looking at the top risers and fallers on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, Unifreight was the top riser with a 14.98% gain. Pro Plastics followed with a 13.68% gain. Fidelity Life putting on 11.28%. NMB adding 6.46%, and then CBZ completing the top five risers with a 5.01% gain. ZB Financial Holdings is the top riser since the beginning of since the introduction of ZIG, up by 372%, and then CBZ also putting on 296%. TSL 233%, and then AFTIS 218%, and then Unifreight up by 2.08%. So that's how those are the top performers. But on the downside, GB Holdings was the biggest loser with a 16% drop, followed by Tenao down by 8.73%. Star Africa continues to sing the blues, down by 3.13%. EcoCash dropping 2.13%, and then Wheeldale down by 0.54%. Most of the funds that were invested went into Delta, about 10.2 million ZIG going into that counter. Kafka, which is very rare, a trade there in Kafka, especially given the amount that was traded, about 5.89 million ZIG worth of shares changing hands in Kafka. Remember, Kafka now has a new CEO, that's Vimbai Nyakujika, formerly with ZIMRA. So he moved over from ZIMRA and is now with Kafka. And then also getting a sizable chunk of the funds that were invested is JRobot, getting about 305,000 ZIG, Econet 154,000 ZIG, and then OK Zimbabwe 46,000 ZIG worth of shares changing hands there. So that's how the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange traded. I think we'll continue to see a little bit of sideways trading, although it seems like volumes are still there, given that Delta about $10.2 million worth of shares changing hands in that particular counter. So that's how it went on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. But just still on that, in terms of the markets, another real estate investment trust is set to be listed, but this time it will be listed on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. That's the FUMA fund, and this is being listed by the owners of properties, Hogarth Hill Center, which is along on your way to Heathcliff. Just before Heathcliff, there's a property development there called Hogarth Hill, which is worth about 28.5 million US dollars. And then there is also Cock Corner along just before Avondale rather, which is worth about 2.2 million. And then also another project in Chegu 2, which is worth about 3 million. All these properties will be listed under a real estate investment trust by the FUMA fund. And so what happens with the real estate investment trust is that 80% of their net profit will be or net income will be distributed to those who have invested in the units, the real estate investment trust units. So that's an interesting one. And you remember that there are about two other real estate investment trusts that are listed, but this time on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. That's the Tigere Real Estate Investment Trust, and then also the Revitas, which is owned by NRZ Pension Fund. And it seems like, according to the estimates by this FUMA fund now, they believe that it has got higher yields than the other two real estate investment trusts that are listed. So it's interesting if they can do that 7.8% yield that they are talking about. And the anchor client or anchor tenant on these properties is Simbisa Brands fast food outlets. They are the anchor tenants for some of these properties.
So there's a question here, Kudzie, that says, could the rise of NMB be linked to the recent loan they got?
I wouldn't say it's linked to that, but well, the performance of shares is linked to a lot of things. But probably some investors is thinking to say, okay, these guys are getting loans that they will then loan out, and that gives them an edge against other banks that might not have loans to give out. Remember, other banks are also getting similar loans. CBZ getting about 80 million US dollars in terms of loans that they will give to the export sector, and NMB also get these funds to also give to the export sector. So there's now increased competition as well in that space. They are all targeting exporters because those who are giving them the loans, they believe that if we loan to exporters, they will be able to generate foreign currency and able to pay back the money no matter what happens to currency dynamics here in Zimbabwe.
There's a concern from Dimitri, who says, why are betting companies not listed? Tanzwa nokurowa tauda umbotenga mashares timbodzora.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So companies, when they list on a stock market, sometimes they would want to raise capital for expansion, for working capital, among other things. If these betting companies believe that they have got enough capital, then they might see no reason why they should be listed on a stock market. But well, it's maybe some of them are listening. Maybe it's an opportunity for them to open more branches, because that is an industry that is really growing, that one. But the thing is, betting, I'm not sure, betting and gambling, are they one and the same thing?
I think they all fall under gambling.
It's a gambling, and it's not a pure gambling license. Actually,
it should.
So maybe when you get when you make your wins when you're gambling, take some of your wins to the stock market, so that at least you're investing in a real asset. Just try and balance your
Baba Panashe, the MC General, says, are you aware of the sudden change in the unofficial exchange rate, now pegged between 23 and 25? All I want to know is if government contractors have been paid and what the Financial Intelligence Unit is doing to correct this anomaly.
Yeah, it's a question to the Financial Intelligence Unit, Mr. Chapires at the Financial Intelligence Unit, to say, what are you doing about it? But what I heard from some of the guys that are still in the trade, they said, the Financial Intelligence Unit was out in full force, and they're on the streets. I'm not sure where the rates are, but I've heard that they were above 20 at some point, 23 at some point. I'm not sure if they are still there. And I think we spoke about it here to say the movements on the parallel market, we saw it after government paid contractors about 300 million ZIG was paid to contractors, and we saw the movement on the rate. And we also saw recently, because industry was also failing to get access foreign currency on the official market, and we saw the central bank intervening just this weekend, putting over $50 million into the market to try and ease pressure on the exchange rate.
Let's look at ZIMRA. They have released their performance update half year.
Yes, so it's interesting one from ZIMRA. We are still waiting for them once they are done with whatever they are doing. I think it's audit or something like that. But so they managed to beat their targets in terms of revenue collection for the first half of the year, because they were targeting to total net revenue. Let's talk about gross revenue. Net revenue about 35.3 million. That was their billion rather. ZIG. That was their target, but they managed to do 36. So they managed to beat their targets, what was set. But also interesting, Tinashe, is that it seems like they are doing well in terms of expanding their tax net, because last year they are saying they had about 65,547 new taxpayers. to add to the to those who migrated from the old system, which were 77,354, and now they've got new taxpayers of 65,547. So it will be interesting to see how to what extent they will manage to collect more in terms of revenue. I think it also depends now with the size and quality of the new taxpayers. It seems individuals are still contributing more to the fiscus, more than any other sector, except obviously VAT is contributing more when you combine your local VAT as well as VAT on imports. It becomes a 26% contribution. But individuals are contributing more with a 20.98%. So we are taxpayers. This is what we are saying, because as individuals we are contributing more to the fiscus, 20.98% as individuals. Also, like I said, VAT from local sales 14.72%, and then you add VAT from imports 11.38% in terms of contribution, and then also excise duty and alcohol also and cigarettes. They are also on that side, excise duty about 14.4%. So it's a significant contributor. But from our minerals, we are not getting as much, I think, in my view. Mineral royalties, they are only contributing 2.7% to the fiscus. So for me,
But what could be the contributing factor to that?
Look, so there's a certain percentage that they charge in terms of royalties that is charged. I think some mines pay 2.5%, some 5%, some 7%, but combined they are only contributing about 2.7%. And even the miners are actually complaining to say my royalties here whatever they are contributing. Of course, they also contribute in other taxes, like if they make profits, they contribute corporate tax and other taxes. But I think we should get more from royalties, because that's guaranteed earnings from our resources as a country. So I think we need to relook at those laws. And then IMTT 2% tax. 1% here. Yango contributor just 3.47%. At some point, they had to contribute more than 10%. But I think almost point, I think more than 15% IMTT. Now Yango contribute 3.47%. Yakutangeri probably one of the reasons is that we are now using US dollar, and for US dollars most of my transactions in my US are not on cash basis.
Okay.
As my swipe, my transfers, mostly it's cash on a cash basis, especially when you're buying from retail outlets, you're buying on a cash basis. Saka IMTT at Zikira. However, 3.4% as much as you could ashoma, it would rather those companies that are formal companies that are still contributing to that IMTT tax, and they believe that effectively when you do the value chain taxes or it comes up to almost like 8% in terms of the IMTT tax. So the industry is still saying this tax should be removed. After all, when it was introduced, it was meant to make sure that even those who are in the informal sector also contribute to the total tax revenues. But then the formal sector maybe should be given some rebates to say, okay, we have seen you also paid IMTT tax, but you are a taxpayer already, so we give you back your money. That's what should be done, so that we lessen the burden on the corporates that are already, you'd rather then say, okay, let me not pay other taxes and just pay the IMTT tax. So I think maybe something that we'll ask ZIMRA when they finally come here. And then also interesting on from ZIMRA report is they are saying our imports were about 3.09 trillion, our imports, which was less than our exports of 4.2 trillion ZIG. So it will be interesting to see how they then match what they have as ZIMRA and what we have from Zimstat. Because from Zimstat we continue to have our imports been higher than our exports. But from what ZIMRA is recording here, exports are higher than our imports. So that mismatch, I think there is need for an explanation from either Zimsted, both Zimsted and ZIMRA to say maybe clarify why those numbers are different. So yeah, that's what I can say about the ZIMRA report.
Okay, let's slightly go back to the stock exchange. As a concerned listener says, how does one legally preserve value if they get their ZIG earnings from selling their shares?
Look, once you have sold, it's now cash. It's now vulnerable to inflation, if there is inflation. It's now vulnerable to currency depreciation, if there is any currency depreciation. So, yeah, it means that you need to think about where else can you invest your
projects
to preserve value. At some point, we could buy gold coins. My gold coins chao, but I think because they want to build my reserves. But I'm not sure if they are still selling the digital backed gold tokens. I'm not sure if they are still selling those. But I know the gold coins are no longer being sold. So yeah, these are some of the things. Maybe you can invest in property depending on how much your sales from stock market were. Otherwise, if you think you have a counter is now overvalued and you need to sell, maybe look for another counter that is still undervalued and it still has got potential and invest in those. Otherwise, if you keep it as cash, then you just have to pray that there is no inflation and there is no currency depreciation for you to be able to preserve value or invest in other investments such as the property market.
6 minutes before 8 is our time. It is Business Focus right here on Capital. You have questions, drop them up on 0719 100404. Kudzie, let's look on an update on day one of the SADC Industrialization Week.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, that was yesterday. That's actually day two, because day one was when they were doing the media awareness, trying to highlight the objectives. So, yeah, and day two now was yesterday, and I think it went well in terms of the presentations and speeches that were given by Finance Minister Mthuli was one of those that presented. And one thing that I also picked up, which I think is of concern for Zimbabwe, is that when we get loans from outside Zimbabwe, they are lending here in Zimbabwe at about 12%. So this is a bank getting a loan from outside, and it's lending at 12%. When they then loan it out, why some fees and charges are 15%. So we have got a high cost of doing business, especially when you are one of those who would want to borrow to expand your business. So that's one thing I think that needs to be. I don't know how we can address it, because we are getting from the global markets, which means that debt resolution restructuring that we're doing those negotiations, I think we need to look at them and make sure that we come out with something, because it will give us access to cheap money. Other countries are getting cheap money from the World Bank, from the IMF, and other lenders, but us, we are getting expensive money, because when they look at us, they say, okay, you are in arrears, you are a bad debtor, so you are a risk. Your risk is very high. So when they give you loans, they give you at very high interest rates, which I think is affecting us, and we need to really look into that. Also interesting is a speech by the Vice President of Afreximbank, which is our all-weather friend in terms of getting loans. Although their loans are expensive, but they always come through for us when we've got challenges. And they are saying they've set aside $400 million for Zimbabwean companies that want to venture into the region. Remember that this is a SADC Industrialization Week, and we are talking about SADC as a region. And they're saying, okay, for Zimbabwean companies that are already in the region or want to venture into the region, we've got this facility of about $400 million that you can access for whatever you want to do. So I think Zimbabwean companies that might not have heard about that facility, please, I know the Afreximbank has got offices here here in Zimbabwe, you can follow up with them so that you can access some of these facilities. I'm not sure what the interest rates will be like. Maybe they are cheaper than what our government gets. So that was an interesting one. In fact, he also spoke about a number of that's Dennis Tenya, who is the vice president of the Afreximbank. He also spoke about a number of funding facilities that are available for firms, for governments, that can be accessed. Remember, Afreximbank is the biggest financier in terms of contribution to the refinery that was built by Aliko Dangote in Nigeria. So we are talking about a bank that can finance Africa's richest person in terms of his projects. So it's powerful. So they've got quite a number of facilities that they have as Afreximbank, and I think Zimbabwe should take advantage of those, and hopefully we work on our risk premium so that we access some of those loans maybe cheaper than what we are getting them at the moment. So and also the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretary General Wamkelemene was also there, and he gave his speech, and and then there was also a discussion around the steel industry, and a presentation being given by the Dinson, the ones who are doing our steel plant, or the steel plant in Manize in Ishivu. The opportunities that are there in terms of up the value chain, the steel value chain, there are massive opportunities, not only for Zimbabwe but for SADC as a region. So Zimbabwe could be a steel hub. But again, then what the representative for the AFDB in Zimbabwe was saying, but we really need to look at our infrastructure now, because using our roads, they get damaged if we are going to use trucks or to transport all this stuff by road. It's very damaging. That's one. In fact, it's one of the reasons also why you see the Victoria Falls Blawayo Road being bad as it is, because also trucks that are transporting coal, haulage trucks transporting coal from Wange, some of them, they use that road and they did get damaged. So we need to really look at our rail system and make sure that it is up to scratch.
Lastly, just briefly on this one, news is the SADC Industrialization Week open to the public?
Yes, it is open to the public. There was a portal that you could register, but yesterday some were entering without registration.
Business Focus with Kudzie Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.